Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros digital event on Real Talk, Rewards and Recognition, sponsored by the amazing team at Blueboard. Before we jump into our content today, it is MSP tradition to ask all of our panelists what new hobbies have they picked up or really gotten better at since the start of the pandemic. And now today, we've got some new panelists with us too. So let's actually start with our new panelist before we go back to our returning panelist, Mr. Kevin Yip. So Kevin C., let's start with you. What new hobby have you picked up or gotten better at since the start of the pandemic?
This one might be boring to a lot of people, but one of the things that I used to like when I was a kid was micro machines. And so there's something about that small nature of those cars. And so one of the things that I've been able to get into, especially with the re-release of the new micro machines and some of the smaller Pixar cars, is with my daughter starting to get her into that. And we've had fun trying to collect them and see which ones we can find in the, blind boxes. And it's been fun.
Exciting. That was the guy that used to talk really fast, right? With the Micro Machines commercials back
Yeah,
in the...
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, right. All right. I remember that guy. That's awesome. Really fun. Stephanie, any new hobbies picked up or refined since the start of the pandemic?
I actually just got a quilting for beginners box, which I feel like I'm like 60 years old or something, but I need something to kind of keep my mind active and whatever. So I'm going to try my hand at quilting. We'll see what happens.
Good. I'm always in the market for beanies, even if they're bad. If you hadn't noticed, there's nothing up top. So when it gets chilly, I'll take it. You can practice with that.
I'll do it.
That's fun. And then certainly last but certainly not least, Mr. Paul, any new hobbies picked up here since the start of the pandemic?
Not new, but a kind of a fun enhancement. Photography has been a serious hobby of mine since I was, a kid. And landscape sports, right? I have a few areas that I've spent time on, but what I've done during this time is focus on portraiture. Not something I've ever done. Understanding, lighting for portraiture, posing, use of props, that sort of thing. So that's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. That sounds like a pretty fun one, and that's a good one too that you can do socially distanced, so it's nice and safe there as well. And then finally, Mr. Kevin Yip, our returning panelist, what new hobbies, anything picked up since the start of the pandemic?
I'm in trying to go on more spontaneous outdoor adventures. And so my co-founder and I and a couple of friends a couple of weeks ago just were like, hey, we should go check out Neowise. And then we went to the top of Mount Tam, like in the middle of the night. It was like foggy, and we kind of like were going around the park and ended up like finding Neowise and the comet and just kind of took some pictures and hung out for like a couple hours. So more spontaneous outdoor adventures keeps you fresh.
Keeps you fresh, and you get some fresh air, and you're out of your 600 or 700 square foot house too, right? Especially in the Bay Area.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, we've got a quorum of folks here joined on live. So just a few housekeeping notes before we start talking about our event today. Please do use the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel allows you to upvote questions. So if somebody asks a particular good question and you like it, upvote it. The second part is we will be launching a poll in the next few seconds. Please do take a second and fill that out as we're going through some of our introductions and all of that. That will help us as panelists really drive the content home to make sure that you're going to get the most out of your time here today. So with that, just a few words about Modern Sales Pros. Modern Sales Pros, as many of you know, is the world's largest revenue leadership community for leaders in sales management, sales operations, sales enablement, and the related disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment where our community members can answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own, leveraging a group of their peers. So we do that through amazing online programming like what we're going to go through today. We also run a very vibrant online community where when you ask a question, you can get responses from not just one or two of your peers, but almost 20,000 people that are representing organizations like those you see here and 5,000 or 6,000 others. So great way to get your questions answered. For those of you who aren't members, you will be invited after our session here today, and we're excited to have you join us. Today wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship of the team at Blueboard, and I'm gonna hand it off to Kevin to say just a few words about Blueboard.
Cool. Thanks, Rich. Blueboard, we help companies sales teams, HR teams reward and recognize their top people. And so for sales folks, we power President's Clubs as a service, sales intensives, and sales contests. And it's all built around delivering experiential rewards and recognition to those folks.
Awesome. And we're excited to have Kevin back. If this is anything like our prep session and our last session we had together, there's going to be a lot of great content here. So let's jump in a little bit and meet our panelists that are going to be diving in today to talk about rewards and recognition. So Kevin, let's get started with you.
My name is Kevin Yip. I'm the COO and co-founder of Blueboard. Pretty much started Blueboard a year after starting my career. I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
I'm Paul Butterfield. I'm the VP of Global Revenue Enablement at Instructure. Sales enablement, revenue enablement comes along in the last part of my career. Previous to that, almost 20 years in either selling or leading sales teams, and therefore also figuring out how to incentivize them.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephanie Biddle and I run sales enablement at Divvy, a financial tech startup out of the Utah area. And I've been in enablement and operations roles for about the past 10 years now.
Kevin Cragen. I've been in sales operations at Domo for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was in sales operations companies from the Bay Area all the way to some that were based out of Germany. And prior to that, I even have a little bit of sales experience. Stumbled into ops.
Exciting. Thank you, panelists, for all introducing yourself. And as folks, our attendees can see, we've got some different perspectives here. So do feel free to ask questions of this group of experts. These are all amazing folks. We had a fabulous prep session, and they do know their stuff. So if you've got some questions, do throw those in the Q&A panel. Also, before somebody asks, the recording will be made available, I promise. It takes about 24 hours post-processing. Once that's done, everybody here will get a copy. But enough from me. Let's actually jump into our programming here a little bit. And Kevin, let's start with you on this point. Kevin Yip, I'm gonna have to be mindful of that here. Really, like, what is the role that recognition and reward schemes play on employee engagement and retention? Like, why is this important?
Yeah, no, it's a fun question that I like to answer because it was really the inspiration for why we started Blueboard. And so in my first job, I was a auditor at PwC. Very fun, sexy job. Got placed on a project and I ended up working 90 to 100-hour weeks after a couple team members quit. And so for 2.5 months, I was grinding. Professionally, I was doing really well, but my personal life was just kind of falling apart. Had gained 25 pounds. I was stressed and anxious. And at the end of the project, my manager came up to me and said, "Kevin, amazing job," and put an Amex gift card on the table and like slid it over to me. And for me, as this top performer, it almost felt like a slap in the face, right? It was a couple $100 and I was like, wow, like I probably saved this project 50 grand, right? And so it really missed the mark. And so for me, rather than making me feel valued, appreciated, I was kind of like, hey, my company, my manager, they don't really care about me. They're not thoughtful, right? And so the inspiration for Blueboard was actually, hey, how do we help companies and managers recognize in a more thoughtful way so that their employees actually feel appreciated, actually feel valued, right? And that's how we came up with this idea of experiences as recognition. And as we've built this product, as we've built this company, employee engagement there's been a huge wave in employee engagement because it's been seen as kind of the indicator and metric that signals productivity, that signals employee retention, right? And there's really 3 things that impact employee engagement. There's perception of leadership, right? There's career development opportunities. And the last thing is recognition, right? And all those 3 things are the core things that move employee engagement. And of those 3, employee recognition is by far the lowest hanging fruit and something you can take action on almost immediately, right? And so in terms of moving the needle in employee engagement in a quick and effective way, recognition is very effective.
I think to add on to that, Kevin, it's almost like, especially in the startup world where I'm at, a lot of the leadership will kind of enforce this idea of like, we're a family. And if you get like a Christmas card from your mom, or you get like a gift card from your mom, it is like a slap in the face. You're like, Mom, I thought you knew who I was. I thought you understood me. I thought you knew what I wanted. And to feel that from like your sales manager or something like that, when you feel like you're a family, it can be hard from an employee recognition standpoint for those people to kind of feel like they're not really understood.
100% agree. Yeah, I always kind of liken it to like kind of the distant uncle or aunt that doesn't know you, and they just get you like a Visa gift card, and you're like, thanks. You kind of like walk away like, okay.
And that's the good years, Kevin.
And the funny thing is, one of the whole idea of the personalized recognition is there may be some reps that do just want that money. Then there may be others that want they'd be happy with, like, one of the things that we've done at Domo is, people who perform and are top of the leaderboard get a baseball bat that they'd previously be able to put by their desk. Everybody can see it. So you have to find that balance of like, what's the personal thing that's going to help drive the individual. But then when you have one of those really big drawn out like competitions or spiffs or something, you don't want to create a world where all of a sudden you've got some of those lower performers who can outperform everybody else because it's just like one specific thing being measured. So it's figuring out like, how do you balance out getting them something good and, specific to them, but not necessarily making it look like it's not a great incentive.
I have to ask, because I know someone out there is thinking it, what's the significance of the baseball bat?
Honestly, I don't know the background. I just know that it's a really cool Domo blue baseball bat, and the thing, jumps out when you walk up to someone's cube. You know that was somebody who performed, and if they've got multiple of them, you know that they're a consistent performer without having to go look at a leaderboard or something like that.
It's interesting. I've seen big trophies. I've seen professional wrestling style championship belts. So the baseball bat, that's a first there. Paul, I know when we were chatting in the prep session, there's this interesting challenge you face with actually your A players here. How have you started to solve sort of this to help your A players stay fired up about?
Well, as the bullet point says, I learned a long time ago in my career that a great salesperson can write their ticket if they're a successful salesperson. So they can go anywhere. There has to be a cool factor. There has to be some other reason that they want to be selling where they are and that they want to stay. There's a couple of pieces of that. Before I get onto the recognition and the retention, rather, some of it is culture. I truly believe that. And that starts with the leadership style, right? They're comfortable working there. And of course, if you've got a great leadership style, they're probably also more tuned in to recognition and that sort of thing. The other piece is the personalization that a couple of folks have already talked about. So I'll give you an example. When we were, this goes back to Microsoft. So I was a Microsoft leader for a number of years, sales leader, and we had a similar problem like that. We had AEs that were very good at their job. We had trips, we had different things that we were trying, out, and people liked them, but they were not new. Then we came up with the, I don't remember what we called it, I'm just going to call it the Microsoft Store, which was a microsite full of cool things. Think back to when you were a kid. Remember they'd hand these things out in school. If you went and sold X number of fill in the blank, then you did make points and you could go use your points to pick a cool prize, like the 100,000 point bike. But the same idea. So they would accumulate, Shroot bucks. I don't remember what we called them, but they would accumulate those, and then they would be able to go on that store, that microsite, and pick. And we loaded it up with some really cool stuff. So it was very personalized because they got to personalize it. But that's an example of the kind of cool factor that I try to bring, to salespeople's lives.
I think they were probably Balmer bucks or Gates bucks,
Balmer.
maybe. Either one of those. Developers.
Yeah.
Paul, I think
Chris,
you make a really good point on that. One of the things we've seen be successful is like giving the power of choice to the people recognized, right? And kind of in your store instance, right? They were able to choose something with those bomber bucks, if you will, something that's right for them, right? And so like I think it's a good thing that like don't just pick something and assume everyone's going to love it, but give people the optionality and choice to like choose something.
And thanks for a reminder there, Kevin. Part of building this was we did survey the team and just got ideas from them of what they would want to see in a store like that, and then threw in a few surprises.
And I think the other part too is, Kevin, when we were prepping a little bit about this, we did spend some time talking about the cool factor and realizing that there's some perception component of this as well. How do you guys start to tackle this, or how do you think about this at Domo?
Yeah, I'm glad that I think it was Paul already called it out. Surveying the team, seeing what people do want, so that they can know, like, we can know what's going to be cool. And as I was talking to Callie Apt, who runs sales enablement at Domo, I was talking about one of the previous things that we did with we had a big blitz where we were trying to generate new pipeline and do all these things. And the part that she pointed out that was really good is there's kind of a journey to it, and that it's not always just about one single incentive, giving people choice. So maybe you have 3 prizes that they can choose for if they've been the winner, and then the runners up can kind of choose from what's left, but then also allowing for other people to get different kinds of rewards along the way. So maybe you're going to run an incentive that lasts for a month, but every week you have different rewards that are incentivizing different behaviors, so multiple people can kind of participate. And then just making sure that you're taking that feedback that they gave you initially and giving things that people want to be seen winning.
I think something that, we're talking a lot about surveying, and we've seen, it go 2 ways, right? People will say, hey, like, what reward do you want? And there's a pick list. Do you want cash? Do you want gift cards? Do you want electronics experiences? And when you kind of format it that way, 9 out of 10 people will say cash, right? And so it's just the way the survey is formatted. But if you structure the survey to say, hey, what has been the most exciting spiff you've had, and have it open field, you're going to get so much variety in the answers that there's going to be much more ideas and much more value in that. And so that's just something we've seen, that like structure of the survey can definitely impact insight.
I think there's a lot of questions coming in on this, and I want to give folks a chance to kind of both digest these results here and also talk a little bit about this. But there's a few questions that have come in, and Kevin, Yip, let's start with you on these. Of like, how do you actually start to figure that out? You touched a little bit on like, if the survey is designed a certain way, everyone's going to say cash. What have you seen some of the best organizations do to really tease apart some amazing rewards? And then other panelists can weigh in too, but I want to start with Kevin on this point.
Yeah, so it's using employee data as one specific input, but not the only input, right? And so maybe you structure kind of a really simple question. Hey, what's been the most exciting spiff reward you've had in your career? Or most motivating, right? You get those answers, you start bucketing them. And then maybe you take, something that Kevin C from Domo said was like, hey, maybe we take something of cultural significance internally, like a bat, right? And how do we kind of pair internal cultural significance, employee data, and some of the cool ideas that we've had along the way, and put that together into a mix, right? And so I think it is really about kind of marrying all the different inputs, sales leadership, cultural, and then employee.
And I think there's, as we've kind of hit on in the past, there is a part of this where you do have to know your people. You do have to be and have that kind of relationship as a leader with them, because if not, you run the risk of the, a distant uncle sending a gift card thing like, oh, cool, great. I haven't shopped at, whatever in 10 years, grandpa, but thank you. This is great stuff. Actually, let's move on a little bit in terms of, we've talked about kind of this concept of rewards and recognition. An important part of it is really communicating that out organizationally and putting the word out there and sharing with your org to make the most out of it. Stephanie, let's start with you on this. Like, how do you, as you come up with these new ideas, how do you get that out into the world of the organization?
Yeah, so it really depends. This is where you can lean really heavily on your sales enablement function, assuming that you have one kind of internally, because that is one of the big pieces of sales enable, is make sure that the reps are being communicated to in a way that they can understand. So usually what I've done in the past, so at Divvy, all of our reps were in office, obviously pre-COVID. So usually what we would do is kind of print out flyers. We'd post them all over the place. We'd put them on their desks. I've seen at other companies them create these maybe mini surprises that you could leave at everybody's desk to kind of amplify the excitement on things or whatever it might be that you're running. If you've got a newsletter that's going out to people, you can add it in there. Sales all hands calls, just kind of drum up that excitement and drop little nuggets of information kind of across multiple different platforms and avenues in order to make sure that not only are you generating that excitement, but you're also explaining the benefits of this, or what, why they should be striving towards this goal or spiff.
I think that's a great point, and sort of the early and often communication is huge here. Kevin C. Sorry, one of the things that we talked about quite a bit was just making sure we had the right buy-in from it. What are some tips you have for our audience about how to get the right?
Yeah, just kind of keeping in mind that sellers, even if we take money out of it, because we all know they're motivated by sales, but also getting that kind of visibility from the top. So if you've got good, high levels of the company, whether it's CFO, CEO, CRO, who are big into whatever the incentive is going to be, and maybe even a component of that reward, it kind of raises awareness. In a recent one we had, the CEO actually came into the room and rolled it out and told everybody, this is why what we're asking for is important, and this is why we're going to be rewarding you in these ways. So then people can walk away and say, hey, that's actually something that I want to go and do, not just for the reward, but also because I know I'm going to be seen by the CEO as participating in something that's important to him.
I think that's a great point. When you get the big dog.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, Paul.
At Vonage, we had a very engaged CEO that way, Kevin. And one of the things we would do is when we'd have folks go through a pitch off and we'd ultimately have a winner, Alan, the CEO, would sign a boxing glove for them. And our significance was, you're going to knock out the competition. But the monetary value of the boxing glove, maybe $30, but people coveted having that. And it was for the reasons you said. Alan signing it for them, personalized, so he knows that they won the pitch off, and it just became a very cool thing culturally.
I think that's a nice reminder too, that the incentives that are done for salespeople don't always have to be super monetary in nature. There's a lot of cool things that you can do that don't necessarily cost a lot of budget.
Yeah, I think that those are great parts, and I think that gets into a little bit of anticipation, as in the role that anticipation plays in some of these incentives. Kevin Yip, I know we chatted a bunch about this in our prep session.
Yeah, I think all of those kind of ways, getting leadership to endorse and even kind of market the program kind of off the bat builds huge anticipation. Not only that it's meaningful to business, but that you're going to be seen, right? Once you win this kind of contest by the CEO, CRO, right? That's huge anticipation of itself. I think another thing that we focus on is that once people are getting rewarded, right? Because this might be an evergreen program where people are winning monthly, quarterly, what have you, is how do you make sure that you're telling the stories of the winners? What did they do to win? What did they do after being recognized? For us, it's like, what experience did they go on? And we share those internally, so that not only there's kind of this initial contest launch, but that it feels real because you're actually hearing the stories of the different reps winning, right? And that builds anticipation and it makes it feel more real. And so that's where we focus a lot on, is that what we call feedback loop of the program.
Well, and I think one of the parts too that, Paul, you had mentioned this during our prep session, is getting some other folks involved. It's not just maybe the employee, but maybe some other folks too that we can get involved in this anticipation.
Yeah, and I don't take credit for this particular one. I've worked for some really amazing EVPs of sales in my career, and what one of them was really good at that I learned from him was doing this. I'll give you an example. President's Club, that's a big deal on its own. But what Frank recognized was that there's someone else typically in that salesperson's life, significant other person of some sort, that is also putting up with the extended hours and closing a deal on New Year's Eve and those things. And so for something like President's Club, he found creative ways to involve them. So maybe a package comes to the house that is, addressed to that other person.
Paul, I lost audio on you. I'm not sure if it's just me. Other panelists, can we hear Paul?
I can't hear
me?
Paul.
Okay. Oh, well, here, let's take a question live while Paul's getting his audio set up. Stephanie, this is a question that came in. It's an anonymous question. It's a great question, though. We talked a little bit about different ways to incentivize the team. Have you ever seen or had any luck with peer recognition systems? And how do you prevent that from becoming a popularity contest?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we actually just recently started implementing in our weekly sales all hands is this idea of like cotton excellence. So our managers would nominate someone to speak in the morning, but they would inevitably kind of like choose one of their peers to nominate that they did something really great. They went above and beyond, the call of duty essentially to kind of do what they wanted. So that's actually turned out to be really great so far. We're still kind of in the infancy stages of testing that out, but it's been really nice because then not only do people kind of have this ability to shout out a peer or colleague for something that they've done that's, kind of goes above and beyond, but they also get visibility on our all hands like kind of webinar when they maybe wouldn't normally have that. So that's worked really well. One of the other things too that we do kind of there at Divvy is we encourage people to fail fast, fail forward. So when we were in the office, we have this Slack channel where we encourage people to post their fails in. And there was actually this grenade, it was called the F-bomb. And you would pass that out based on like peer submissions or whatever, like upvotes on their particular fails. So every week we would pass out the fail bomb to someone. It would encourage people to make light of their failures so long as they were doing something to correct the behavior, like moving forward.
I like that, the F bomb.
Yeah.
Here it is.
One quick kind of comment on the peer, evaluations. We've used systems in the past. A place I was at when I was at Inside Sales a while back, where we'd have the pitches get saved online, and a rep would have to go in, submit their pitch, and then they would have the ability to be graded by their peers, but also go in and grade their peers. And I didn't really see the popularity contest aspect of it come out because people knew that they were also going to have to do their pitch, and they had to grade it on very specific pieces of the pitch. It wasn't just, oh, I thought that was great, 5 out of 5, but it was on the individual components of it. Like how well did you cover the product message? How well was it delivered? Timing, like different things. So people through an aggregate response could start to see where maybe they have places where they can improve because it's not just their manager telling, but others.
I think the peer
Rich,
nomination
I'm back.
Oh,
sorry.
No worries. Welcome back. I think the peer recognition is really powerful for kind of sales support, getting a deal through, right? Because the AE is usually the one that gets kind of the spotlight. But, if the AE is calling out, maybe the SDR who sourced the deal, right? Maybe the sales engineer who helped on putting together like a killer demo, right? That really kind of, it spreads kind of that feeling of appreciation and value that we win as a team. And so I think very effective in that realm.
I think just a plug for the former sales engineers in the world right there. Please do take care of your sales engineers. They have a very fun, challenging, exciting job, and they often don't get a lot of glory. So just remember them when you close that big deal. Paul, we're back now? We got you?
Yeah, I apologize, gang. I don't know why the audio cut out.
No worries. You were about halfway through, but let's take it back to the beginning just to make
Okay.
sure folks get the full point, because it is an important point. You were just talking about how you've seen organizations involve others in building
Right.
that anticipation of, for an incentive or reward or something like that.
Right. So that's absolutely right. There are always families or a significant other of some sort involved in a salesperson's life. And they also have to put up with, like I say, closing a deal on New Year's Eve instead of being in with the rest of the party guests and that sort of thing. And so recognizing that, and again, I don't take credit. I've worked for some really great sales leaders. Find ways to include them in the excitement, in the anticipation. One example that I really like was it In Contact, where we had a great President's Club. All right, President's Club's cool and all of that, but to help involve the other people in their life, a package addressed, say your spouse. Package comes to the house addressed to the spouse. Inside was a Jamaica poster, confetti, some In Contact flip-flops, that sort of thing that was just for them, acknowledging their role in the salesperson's success and getting them excited about President's Club too.
To
I
kind
think
of
that's a
spin
great
off
point.
of, oh, sorry,
What's
Kevin.
happening? No, go for it.
We actually did something very similar for a sales kickoff at my time at Alteryx. We knew of people who were winning these special awards during kickoff. We actually got in contact with their families prior to and had them record a special secret message that the rep had never seen before. And then we highlighted it up on the big screen. So they saw their family first before they recognized that they were winning an award. And it was really sweet to see the reps get a little bit emotional, hear their family and their kids kind of talk about how much they meant to them. I think that's involving their families or who's important to them, I think is hugely, hugely impactful.
And I love that didn't cost anything, right? And one of the trends, one of you was mentioning a few minutes ago, don't forget to show love to your SE, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And I've noticed a cool trend on LinkedIn that I think will increase, and that is people are finding the kudos function. And I'm seeing more, at least within my network, where an SE or someone else instrumental to closing an opportunity or the success of any big project gets called, gets identified with a big kudos banner. It's very graphic. It jumps right off your feed, and they're named and tagged. And that's just been kind of a cool thing to watch. And that may be a way to help motivate. Again, it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, and I think especially as we transition into talking about the right and the wrong ways to do it with sales, there is this overarching question of, hey, how can I do this effectively, right? And now we're hear some fun stories about what works and what doesn't. Kevin, you've had a lot of you've had a lot of time in the game. What are some of the things you've seen that work really well and maybe don't work so well in sales?
Yeah, it's really that exclusivity we keep coming back to and talking about. In fact, in a past life, once upon a time, I was that person who worked at the cell phone store, sometimes in the middle of the mall, that would talk to people as they walk by, but then ultimately in actual brick and mortar stores, and then run these different incentives for us to go and sell certain products and try and whoever sells the most gets a free reward. And there was this particular phone that was a guitar edition phone, a Fender edition phone. And they said, whoever sells the most just of this, not that specific version, but that model, gets this Fender phone. And it otherwise was in very short supply. It didn't have a lot of availability. And so all of a sudden, as a salesperson, I'm like, hey, not only can I get a phone out of this, but I can get one that when I take that out, people are going to look at it and say, oh, I can't even get one of those really. They're not even there. So that exclusivity and kind of the cool factor was a big thing for me. And I ultimately was able to go and win it, because right at the beginning, I said, I'm going to go and do that. And so it's one thing that, as we come up with, whether it's spiffs or anything else, how can we get that cool factor? And the most recent one, I don't mean to keep occupying all the talking, but if I have a microphone, I'll go. I tell them a little while ago, we had a spiff where whoever hit a certain metric, it was going to get a briefcase full of money. So yes, it was cash, but it wasn't, here's an Amazon gift card, or we're going to give you a bump on your check. It was, we're going to have the sales leaders and the GMs come in with this metal briefcase and present it to you full of cash, like something straight out of a spy movie. And that was huge. I mean, it got excitement. All the sales reps came in to watch that thing happen. And we still see those, at least when we're in the office, those briefcases sitting around those people's cubes that are the most exclusive things around. So that's a big deal.
That sounds awesome. I would love to have a briefcase full of cash as a spiff. That would motivate the hell out of me, at least, as a sales, because it's cool. You get the bragging rights with it, and it's like you're gonna go tell your friends about that as well. Paul, I know you had hit on a little bit about the boxing glove before, but what are some of the things you've seen that are the right and the wrong ways to get people in a sales org kind of fired up?
I'd like to share a couple stories on that because, again, just some great examples I've seen, some monetary, some not. Although I don't know if I can compete, Kevin, with the briefcase full of cash. That's pretty cool. For example, one inside sales organization that I was working with, at the beginning of every, I don't remember if it was the month or the quarter, every sales, all the AEs picked their fight song or celebration song, whatever they wanted to call it. And it was built, and so everybody was on the same sales floor, like Stephanie was talking about. And when you closed an opportunity in Salesforce, your hype song was played over the entire floor through the speakers. And if you were top rep, that meant you got to pick first, because there were some very popular hype songs that you could imagine, right? Or maybe it was the top 5 reps went in that order. That was really cool. And it created so much buzz on the floor, right? Yeah, you could ring a gong, you could do those things, but this was personal recognition that also helped the group feel like we're winning. And one of my suggestion could even be that for some of the folks that are on this call, you don't necessarily have to be a sales or an operations leader. Some of the coolest recognition I've seen was spontaneous from the sales floor. Give an example. One of my team brought in looked like it was like Rockstar 1988. You know, it was like one of these cheapo cassettes from back in the day where they compile a bunch of songs. And I don't know how it even started. All I know is all of a sudden, the biggest status on the team was to get to put that. So if you had, when you closed a deal, you got to put the Rockstar tape on the edge of your cubicle, and until somebody closed a bigger deal than you, it stayed there. And so I mentioned that story just because there's folks on this phone that could even help drive that recognition culture and have your own version of the Rockstar tape. You could tradition.
There. I love the Rockstar tape, the F-bomb. We're getting a lot of good ideas here of low and no cost rewards and recognition. I think that's really fun, actually. Stephanie, what do you think? What are some of your thoughts on the right and the wrong way here?
Yeah, I think kind of looping back to our one of our initial kind of discussions was you need to kind of understand who it is that you're motivating. So I know one of the things that I've often kind of run into is, as an example, if you're trying to motivate your SDR team, usually a lot of them are typically younger in their career, and they like to have these very unique experiences, something that is going to kind of stand out that they can maybe like show to their friends or their family and just be like, I got to do that. I got to take part in that. A lot of times if you're working with enterprise sales reps who have maybe been in the industry for a little bit longer, you know, a trip to Hawaii for President's Club maybe isn't going to motivate them as much. But a trip, I remember somebody mentioned kind of on our prep call, a trip to like Bali. Like that's somewhere that people aren't normally going to take their families, or they wouldn't normally kind of go to that destination. But somewhere like that, I think is really important. So understanding your audience or who's going to be the end kind of consumer of this reward program, it's important to understand kind of where that all fits in. And I think you know, something like a Blueboard where they can choose those options for themselves is super impactful to be able to make sure that it's meaningful for them.
Another way I think of right way, wrong way, Kevin Craig, you touched on this earlier in the conversation, and that is designing whether it's a big, small recognition, but designing it correctly. And what I mean by that is that it needs to be something that is a stretch and is meaningful for your top performers so that they want to play, but also still feels in reach for the folks that aren't in the top flight. Otherwise, it's almost a disincentive for them. You know, they're, well, I'm never going to win that. And they just, and I don't know that I have all the answers for that, but I have seen that that has a huge impact on the success of any kind of recognition program.
Well, just to quickly jump onto that, the most recent one that I talked about, where we had that sales blitz, where we had the executives really helping drive the visibility to it. One of the key things in that design was being conscious of the current times. So we're in this COVID pandemic time. We can't send people around, but there does still need to be, likely we're still spending money on some incentives. And the top people who won got to choose between a Peloton bike. We had like a Nordic Track rowing machine and one of those cool mirrors, like those electric mirrors. But to Paul's point about making sure that it's balanced, it wasn't just whoever hit the one metric got it. It was a whole balanced scorecard approach, meaning that there were multiple metrics because you want to drive behaviors that are going to contribute to the success and be aligned with the culture you're trying to create. But at the end of the day, still make sure that everybody can have a participation in that, and then that the reward is something that they're willing to go and stretch for. And that was one that was definitely successful for us.
We actually saw our customer success team, like right at the beginning of COVID and working from home. A lot of their spiffs or their monthly spiffs was like a really great chair or like a monitor setup, like kind of that idea of making sure that you stay true to like the times and everything. People went nuts over that stuff. I was actually super surprised, but they were like all in to get this like awesome gaming chair.
And one of the cool things with that, when you get people excited, it's not just they sit back to see who wins, but we had them also go and put in, they had to submit a response, basically, so give a submission of why they think they should win it. So it was something that was cool for COVID, but then we were also being able to practice and get there as an organization to say, what are these best practices they did to actually even succeed during this time in order for them to qualify for that incentive.
That speaks to my sales enablement heart on so many levels.
I'll give Callie credit for that one at Domo, who runs sales enablement.
No, I think this is great conversation. There's a bunch of great questions in the Q&A panel, so we'll jump into that in a second. But Kevin, I know you've done and seen a lot on this. What are just a couple things that are important for folks to remember of like the right way to do it for a sales team and some of the wrong ways to do it?
Yeah, I think just to string it all together, I think, we've touched on, like something like a briefcase, full of cash, right? That's incredibly memorable, right? It is eye-catching, it is marketable, right? And then we've touched on what's meaningful, right? Of like, how do we involve significant others, families, maybe send somebody to a place they haven't been to, maybe, cross off a bucket list, maybe enable them to get back in shape, right? And if you're able to kind of marry like memorable and meaningful together, that's going to make like a perfect incentive. Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, even that would be really cool, having your family say, hey, thanks for achieving this. It's awesome. We're behind you in this. We love you, et cetera. That would be super memorable. We're going to move into Q&A, and we're going to try to get through as many of these as we can. We've got a bunch in here. Please do use the Q&A panel. Also, if we don't get to your question, this will give us an opportunity to follow up with you afterwards. So maybe Kevin or Kevin C or Stephanie or Paul has some great insight on whatever you're asking about. So we'll get to that. We may get to that afterwards. First question coming in here, and I think, Kevin Yip, I think I want to start with you with this one. So we spent a lot of time talking about AEs today, and we touched a little bit on like sales engineers and some of the supporting folks. But what about leadership folks? What are some of the things that you've seen for people that are in leadership roles or that you want to act as leaders? Any spiffs or incentives or rewards that you've seen that work really, really well for folks that are a little bit more senior?
Yeah, no, this is great. And I think it's kind of it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. I think individual contributors are very much incentivized and recognized based on metrics, right? And I think that kind of rolls up, right? But for leadership, leaders don't only achieve results, right? They're doing so much more, right? Intangibles. And so what we see a lot of companies recognize on is their company values. Which leader is demonstrating the company values the most, in addition to achieving their results, right? And so we see kind of a leadership recognition, you know, manager level and up, being very much tied to values.
I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you know, I mentioned before the kind of balanced scorecard, and we'll have things that are going to be, we've got metrics that are easily measurable, like how many dials, emails, pipeline generation, all those types of things can contribute. But then you also need a certain amount of kind of that subjective evaluation of who's you know, contributing to the company culture correctly and doing some of those other intangible behaviors. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we did with that scorecard approach. We at Domo use the force management selling methodology. So for leaders, as we come up with different SKUs and want to try and incent them, that's something that we can look at as saying, are they enforcing or inspecting those same types of behaviors with their teams? And then using Domo, how we can get the data around that to be able to identify that that's happening.
One of the ways I've seen those sorts of recognitions be really impactful is specific examples, not just that Rich incorporates this value, company value, but here's why. Something that maybe came from their team or a coworker, but I think it's being specific when you recognize people that's important.
I think the values component is huge. And that also, Kevin, gets to, there was another question that came in about, hey, what else should I be thinking about here? But just to recap, there's some sort of basic metrics that you're looking at. And then there's the, how is this person living and embodying some of the values that we have as an organization? And that becomes, with those examples, right, with practical examples, not just, you know, Paul was there when I called him, therefore he's embracing community, if that's one of our values, but really how he actually did it. Those two things being the components that form the elements of that balanced scorecard. Paul, I wanted to get you started with this one, specifically for things that work for remote, for rewards that work for folks when they're working from home. We're all remote now. I loved Kevin's example of like the cool chair. What have you seen other things that folks are doing that are kind of exciting and innovative here?
This isn't necessarily just in a remote environment, but along the lines of recognition. And that is, you know, even in this environment, at least the company where I work in Structure, we still have all hands. And we have sales all hands, we have a company all hands, and elevating some of that recognition into those all hands, those connections with the other people that you work with on those meetings, is probably even more important in some cases because you're not running into them in the office right now. And so we've continued to try and use that just to publicly recognize and, again, share reasons. It might be a sales thing. Everybody might already know why that person's being recognized, but if it's not a sales thing, it's not a metric thing, then why? Another one that, I'll be honest, we haven't rolled it out, but I've been toying with the idea, and that is working with our marketing team to create exclusive, what's the word I'm looking for? Exclusive virtual backgrounds for Zoom meetings that you are awarded and only you get to use them, but I haven't rolled it out yet.
We were just talking about that the other day. That's funny. I think that's a great idea.
I love that idea.
It's another good low cost kind of bragging rights type thing. I love that idea of like, oh, it's a tropical background.
I think too, to that point, as far as like, what can you do with people that are maybe working remote, or even if you've got a reduced spiff budget, which I think all of us have probably experienced, if not like right now, then in the past. One of the things that I've seen work well at other companies, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it here at Divvy too, is giving them the opportunity to speak with someone like a CEO or maybe even someone that's on your board of directors, giving them the opportunity to speak to someone at that level for a good amount of time. Maybe you just give them the ability to get some lunch on DoorDash or whatever and sit down with a conversation with one of these people to really expand kind of and have that conversation around their career or maybe what they want to do moving forward. giving them the opportunity and the like visibility into someone maybe at that level, depending on how big your company is, could be really impactful for someone's just professional life in general. And it doesn't take a whole lot of coordination or money to make that happen, but then you're actually giving to them like some kind of professional growth opportunity too.
I love that for our President's Club customers right now, because people aren't able to get together in groups at trips. Several of them are actually offering kind of like mentorship sessions with
Yeah.
senior leadership. So yeah, no, it's a great idea, and a lot of companies are doing that right now.
And it's
Something
also,
that I
it's
use as a
something,
good.
yeah, I was going to say, it's also something that's pretty, I mean, that's relatively low cost for, and probably a very memorable experience, especially if it's a very junior person meeting with a very senior, an SDR meeting with somebody on any board of directors is going to be like, whoa, just met with somebody on our
Exactly.
board. That's awesome.
I was going to say something that I used for a long time, that's harder because a lot of us now have unlimited PTO, but it's just what it sounds like, that they would get an extra half day or an extra day of PTO. And there are probably folks in this audience that are still, you know, in a situation where they could use that, but people loved that.
I think even if you have unlimited PTO, a lot of people feel like maybe they can't always take it. So like enforcing that, just be like, you get this Friday off. Like that's what you get, is you just get the Friday off. Like there's no judgments, there's no nothing. That's an easy way to kind of take advantage of that too.
I think that's great. And there's a lot here to pull on. I want to change gears a little bit. And Kevin Yip, I want to direct this question towards you. Is there a size of company or stage of organization where this stuff starts to matter a lot? Is there a sweet spot for when we should start to, as organizations, think about investing in sort of rewards and recognition programs?
So my answer would be just kind of when there's work being done, right, there's recognition to be done as well. And that kind of starts from, day one, of a company. Obviously, as you grow, right, programs need to become, you need to think about scale, you need to think about structure, you need to think about equity, things we've touched on today. But being acknowledged and feeling appreciated for like what you're contributing, it's pretty fundamental to like a great, like feeling great about the place you work at, right? And feeling motivated to come back in and do it all again, the next day, the next month, the next quarter, right? And so, like I said, kind of recognition is a low-hanging fruit that drives employee engagement in the beginning. You should start doing this like day one, right? And it could be in very easy ways. It could start just verbal acknowledgements, shout outs and meetings, right? And then you could build into the more structured programs that we've been talking about.
I think it's an important discipline too, to really start to get that understanding of your employees and what motivates them and what they're in it for. Could also help there as well, right? Sort of building that as a discipline.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Like when we've worked with organizations and figured out what best in class managers are doing, recognition is it's a skill, right? It's a practice that the best managers are consistently putting in place, and the best managers have the best performing teams. And so absolutely, it is a managerial discipline that should be practiced.
And finally, we're going to take one last question here, and then we're going to get our key takeaways from our panelists. And this is a fun one. Kevin, let's start with you. And this is a great question. Any tips, traditions, or rituals for kind of 100% remote sales teams, which we're all dealing with right now?
Yeah, I think that's it. This even probably extends beyond just, sales teams, but at the beginning of the whole, COVID pandemic, when our team became remote, that was one of the things that we were still trying to figure out how to continue, is that face-to-face time. And so what we ended up with is this, a couple times a week, designated time where everybody's going to come in. We're not talking about work. We're all just understanding what's going on in people's lives, what you're doing for the weekend, all that stuff. But to kind of make it exciting, so it wasn't just like chatting, we went and said whoever has the coolest background is going to, you know, be able to win. And that was going to be decided by our VP of sales ops at that, you know, for that week. And so we had people just really trying to get funny backgrounds, or really clever ones, or extremely, you know, well thought out ones. And it just kind of went on forever after that, to where whenever we have this meeting that's become tradition, we still get on and chat and laugh at people's backgrounds. And that's been really good. I think for sales teams, it works a lot the same way.
I like that silly background, the background contest. I love it. Paul, anything else? Anything you've seen that works?
First off, I mentioned Kevin Cragen that it didn't become a tradition. It was like a Spirit Week thing that we did as a company back when this all started. And it was amazing to see the disproportionate number of backgrounds that were Tiger King related. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
it was like 25% of them probably.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is an increased usage of celebrating on Slack. And so, you know, within the Slack channel, it could be in the region, it could be, you know, in one of the general channels, but people are feeling more comfortable calling out when they've had a win and something's closed and a little bit about it. And then everybody just starts piling on with, you know, with the emojis and the comments and stuff. And that could even continue someday when we're back in the office, but it's a cool way to stay connected.
Oh, this is great. And I think we're gonna wrap up here. So panelists, obviously we've shared a lot of amazing information today, but if you can think and keep it tweet length, what's one or two things that you want folks to take away from the session? Stephanie, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways are to understand who your audience is and who you're kind of creating these incentives for. And then two, try and be as creative as possible. And if you have a hard time being creative, which I know I do sometimes too, don't be afraid to reach out to other people. I mean, you've heard a number of people here on the panel that have had or experienced some really great ideas. Reach out to your network on LinkedIn or wherever you kind of go and get that feedback from other people, which can often kind of get your brain moving a little bit faster.
And I think for me, big takeaways are don't be afraid to try things. It's going to be a journey. Try different things, talk to your team, see what resonates. But don't do anything that you can't actually track and report on, since that'll cause you pain later.
One of the things that take away is honestly take away from me as well, watching some of the questions that have come in, is continue to think of how we take traditions, celebrations, recognitions that worked great in the office and continue those in the virtual environment that we're working in now. The company I work for told us last week we won't be back in the office on a day-to-day basis until June of next year. And I think a lot of us are in that same position. So that means we need to be, and again, I'll credit the folks that are asking those questions to us online. So that's something I'm going to go away thinking about more.
So much great stuff. I think, you know, I think Kevin C, you mentioned this, is don't be afraid to try something. And when you do, keep it simple. You know, these aren't, you know, a lot of times contests, you know, they're not everlasting, you know, they could be a week, a month, right? And then you could try something new. But, you know, I think right now, especially, a lot of us are working from home. What day is it today? I don't know, right? It's kind of everything is blurring together. These contests keep it fun, exciting, help us people mix things up. And so, yeah.
Panelists, you're all, this was amazing. You're all also incredibly busy people. So thank you so much for taking an hour out of your days and sharing this amazing perspective and these amazing stories and insights with the entire MSP community. On behalf of the 19,000 and growing members, I wanted to thank Blueboard as our sponsor. Kevin C, Stephanie, and Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today. And once again, folks, this recording will be available in about 24 hours. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day and stay safe. Panelists, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.